Right, so my name is Michael. I'm the CEO of Dare, CTO of Inside Ideas Group, which is part of a network of companies. And today we're going to talk about innovation. We're going to talk about what it means to us, what it means to companies, clients, brands, and if selling innovation actually kills it. On the panel with me today, I've got Ada, who's a futurist. I've got Robert, who's the CEO of Wirehive. I've got Robin, who is a director at the AAR Digital. And I've got Adam, who's a CXO at Tribal. So I'm going to keep it quite loose. I'm just going to start straight away. So if anyone could just quickly take 1 minute, do a quick intro, what you've done, where you come from, where you're going.
Where am I going?
Yeah, where you going?
Existential question. Hi, good morning. My name's Ada Paris. So I have a background working in education, learning, design. Worked at the IPA, running lots of their committees, set up the School of Communication Arts, which is advertising and entrepreneurship. Went to Telefonica and helped to set up Wira, their technology accelerator program in the UK. And now I kind of work as a futurist, strategic consultant, doing public speaking, coaching, consulting, lots of stuff, many hats.
Hey everyone, I'm Robert Belgrave, CEO of Wirehive, which is a cloud consulting business. So we help do the kind of plumbing behind innovation, whether it's servers or data and AI projects or that kind of stuff. We work with Microsoft and Amazon and people like that to help agencies deliver on their dreams of innovation. I also run a podcast called Alexa Stop, which is about how technology is changing our lives. So like and subscribe. Yeah, that's me.
Morning, everyone. My name is Robin Charney. I'm from a management consultancy called AAR, where we help brands partner with new types of agencies and consultancies, and I look after the innovation and digital practice there.
Hi, everyone. I'm Adam Powers. I'm the Chief Experience Officer at Tribal Worldwide. Prior to this, I was at BBH for over 5 years, and then before that, I was at the BBC for more than 10 years working on their products and services. I currently run the customer experience practice at Tribal, which includes everything from UX design, service design, UI, and visual design.
Brilliant, thank you. Thank you. So a great panel. Obviously, we've all got quite a lot of experience in digital. I myself have been doing this now for 24 years. Ex-Havas had my own agency as well, so seen the whole digital cycle go through. So I'm just going to start off by just start with Adam, and ask, what do you think defines innovation in the industry we work in? Because there's many variations of what innovation means.
It's a word that's bandied around a lot, and it's probably best if I anchor it in our own business. And I think we see it in kind of two streams. One is that innovation is everybody's responsibility and everybody's job. It's in the small things as well as the big things, and we've got a responsibility to be delivering it for our existing clients who we've had a relationship with for many years, the likes of VW, as well as for new clients that come on board. And then I guess the other stream is perhaps more familiar, which is a practice that we have called Spark. It's one of our 6 practices. And it's their job to go out to the world, actually outside of our sector, and find different kinds of people, educational institutions, really just different people to play with, to bring different perspectives to what we do and to what we make, to try and get to different solutions. So trying to find different ingredients and make new kinds of relationships. And so for me, it's that kind of double-headed thing. It's kind of every day, but then what are the opportunities to make those leaps by getting ingredients together that you wouldn't normally mix.
And the way you do that by creating an organization within your business that allows you to have the freedom to go and engage? Because obviously you're a money-making company, It's a business. Or is it something that you find people initiate by themselves and then it gets grasped by the rest of the business?
It's a perennial challenge. You've got to try and find the balance. So we do have some formats and structures within the business that are essentially that gives people 3 days a month to come together around a problem, pull in people that they think are interesting, and try and make something to solve that problem. But equally, we try and encourage people to all be a bit of an entrepreneur, and if they identify something they think they can do something about, then come to the leadership team and we try and carve out some space or some opportunity for them to do it. So you need to kind of feed both. I think without the structured thing, we wouldn't be practicing what we preach. We need to create the space for that to happen, but equally we don't want to force it, and we want to enable people to bring of themselves to the business as well.
Okay, thank you. And Robin, I know you've got strong opinions on this. In terms of companies or brands that have been around for a while and are trying to evolve, are trying to innovate, How do you think the best way to approach that is, or how do you see it being approached? Because obviously you work a lot with clients and agencies.
Yeah, so what we do is in a business is we help brands find partners to help them innovate. So my point of view on innovation is quite strong in that I believe innovation is best served by going outside the organization in order to find partners to help do the innovation outside, because I'm not convinced that brands today really have the muscle memory that they used to have around doing their own innovation. It feels that their business is about business as usual, and the further away horizons are more about finding partners and people to help them build that outside the organization, because there's not enough speed and often not enough willpower within organizations to do it themselves.
This brings me to the topic. So if a brand engages a startup that builds AR, for instance, and chooses to acquire that startup or incubate them, do you see that killing the actual startup?
It really depends. I think the brand has to have the processes and the culture in order to make sure that that baby, new heart, whatever you want to call it, that thing that they're trying to bring back into the business won't be killed. Because often, and I'm sure I see lots of nodding heads in the audience, it's very much about culture more than the process of buying something new in.
Okay, Ada?
Sorry, I just want to jump in there, because for me, what I do is I help to create ethical cultures of innovation. So what I mean by that is that innovation should be systemic across the whole organization. I don't think that it should be one person's job. And so for me, innovation it's less about the ideas and the execution of those ideas. It's more about the processes and understanding that what you're trying to do is solve problems. And so by creating that ethical culture of innovation, what you're doing is turning everybody into a philosopher, getting them to ask questions, and it links quite closely to purpose. The purpose of the organization can be linked to this understanding of how we're trying to solve problems, and the innovation is the execution of that. And so using technology is a way of doing that. And sometimes, I think we've had this discussion before, that sometimes it becomes about the big shiny thing at the end. And that to me is not the innovation, that's a shiny idea. But actually it's more about understanding how do you create this culture of innovation internally, first and foremost, before you start doing everything else.
Just one last point. So when we do help brands find new partners, often the brand thinks that what they're looking for is the capability to do the innovation. What we counsel them to look for is actually the culture fit. That's the most important thing. Finding people who can do things is actually not that hard. Finding people with whom you want to do those things is really, really hard.
So that's a good point. So one of the things that I've noticed over the last sort of 24 years is we go through a cycle of new technology, new methodologies, new ways of working, and then it slowly either becomes purely money-making, or it becomes something that no one wants, and then we start all over again. And I guess the point I'm trying to make around innovation being something that I believe isn't sustainable in the wrong culture, as you've just mentioned, is we have got a lot of different types of technologies today, a lot of different types of companies, connected journeys trying to be created. To expect 7 or 8 different entities to all have the same culture is very difficult. So how do you tackle that? How do you manage to have innovation from a brand's perspective or a company's perspective, working with multiple suppliers? I mean, we walk into many centers or many meetings, and you see debates around which platform to use, which skill set to use. Is this something we do now or we do in the future? Do we exploit the current platforms we have while building new systems, or do we scrap and start again? So I know, Rob, this is kind of your world, so it'll be good to hear a little bit how you see that.
Yeah, sure. I think right now, so much of what people describe as innovation is ultimately technology-driven, one way or another, and whether people might say, no, it's not, it's a new business model. Okay, but it's a new business model that is only possible because of technology, right? So we work with agencies and their clients to kind of help explore what some of these different things might look like. And the ones that succeed versus the ones that fail, I think you've got to start small. You've got to kind of employ that lean startup mentality, right? And I think this is where large brands have successful innovation practices, is because they've managed to create a silo that enables that to happen somehow within the frame. And so take that approach, think about how do we iterate quickly? How do we fail fast? How do we explore something without committing too much time and resource to it? And then it's all about being, pioneering and being exploratory and trying things, right? So go out and speak to the different specialists in the industry. I don't know, let's say you want to build something using data. Right now, one of the leading companies to speak to about data would be Microsoft. Go and talk to them. Say, hey, Microsoft, we want to build something with data, or find a partner and say, help us find our way through this maze of Microsoft to figure out what this stuff can actually do. And then spend like a day, not a month, prototyping something or just coming up with an idea, and then kill it and start again, right? Try something else. And I think that need to explore what's possible quickly, and then avoid going too far down a road to ultimately have to can something is really important, because I think businesses get quite. I think it can kind of really kill an innovation culture if too much time and resource is wasted, and that's the trick, right? Is exploring what's possible quickly.
It's that nurturing that culture of curiosity and play, but making sure there is a framework around that, or it's time bound, because ultimately we can be playing forever. But actually, you need to have a framework where you say, this is the time, you said we're going to have a day, but enable people to explore and to play and to try things out, because that's where the innovation and the ideas and the sparks will start to happen.
I guess my point of view is that most of the brands I speak with, they don't have a shortage of ideas. There's a shortage of executing and delivering against those ideas. And the amount of clients I speak to who say, God, the amount of time I've wasted answering the wrong question and wasting money. So it's, what's the process for finding the question and nurturing the right questions? But most brands that I've come across, there are lots of ideas. There's not a lot of execution out there.
Do you think, and maybe this is I'd love Adam's opinion on this, certainly some of the tier one brands that the guys work with. Do you think people really understand what's possible? Do you think they already know? Because my experience has been, we do these like AI envisaging workshops with people for a day, and they walk in, they think they know, but actually they have no idea really what is possible today and what the technology enables them to do. Like, what do you think?
I really feel like that's part of the kind of partnership triage in that the first days and weeks of the relationship, where you figure out, where is this business on its technology maturity curve? Because some businesses really have got their shit together and they understand some of this, and you can work much more quickly with them. Others are in a very different place, and maybe somebody high up the food chain says, we need some innovation, buy some. So I think you have to cut your cloth accordingly. One of the things we touched on around creating this kind of separate unit outside of the main body of the beast, and we were talking about this earlier. Business I was on the edge of when I was at BBH, a high street retailer was looking to do it, and they set up a beta lab, had some amazing people working in it. And I think the thing that we advised them, if this was going to work, they needed within that beta lab not just the people with all the ideas, but actually have finance people in that, have operations people in that lab, so that when those great ideas emerge, you've got people that really know how to inject that back into the business and make it part of the main machine. And I think there's a lot of organizations that forget to do that. They have the kind of the creative, the dreamers, the Imagineers in that, but actually then whatever they develop kind of withers on the vine because it just doesn't get accepted back into the body.
Exactly, because I've seen instances where there is an innovation hub within a business and it's seen as a very separate entity, and so it becomes a kind of them and us. And I think that that's where the culture piece comes in making sure that if you do, I think sometimes you do need that separate entity to incubate those ideas, but you also need to make sure that everybody else within the business has a relationship with that, and they understand that it's not, this is their role, and this is what they're doing, and this is where I am, and I can't have an idea and I can't get involved. But it's somehow making sure that the culture fits, so people feel included, and they feel that they can actually go there with ideas or learn from it. It's a two-way process.
Yeah, so I've got a strong view on this. So I know in incubations or in-house innovation hubs take quite a bash in the last 5 years, but I actually believe that they are important, and I'll explain why they're important. And they have to be separated from the business. They don't need to be part of business. When you've got a business like a financial company who's 120, 130 years old, and they literally look at EBITDA numbers and financial. It's very hard to do what you're saying. You could be in a conversation for 3 or 4 years before you even understand how to split the budget between brand, marketing, social, to even have the money to buy the equipment you need. And to have a conversation with a CEO, and I do this a lot, with a COO or CEO of a bank that's 150 years old, they don't understand how it works. They've hired one person to be head of innovation. That person has no power. It's very difficult. So by creating this hub, it's a starting point. And it creates a vibe. It creates the noise that you need to start having conversations. So it's a different way. So the innovation dying, from my point, isn't so much about the people as such. It's more about the operations of the business, where they are in their timeline. So you've got companies that are remodeling for today. You've got companies that are creating new purpose to put them in the right framework to compete with the new guys who are coming on the scene. And you've got companies that are reimagining themselves for tomorrow. And depending on which circle you fall in, your approach to innovation is very different. So all the points we're raising are really good, but I do think there isn't a one way. I think it's a blend. And I think where I want to steer the conversation is when that happens, whether it's people, organization, structure, do you think once innovation exists and we start to sell it, does it tend to die? Because I do think that we have great technology, great people, but as soon as it comes into a business or it gets incubated or we start partnering, like you mentioned, the brand itself starts applying pressure on that startup, which then makes the startup slow down in the way that they approach things. They start becoming a little bit more business-like, which sometimes in an innovation mindset, you need to be free. You need to have no constraints. So what's your thoughts on that?
I think you have a very narrow definition. I'm not sure that it's just about startups going into other businesses. If there's business model innovation, then no, I don't think the new business, whatever that might be, selling and making money necessarily kills the old business. I think they expand. I think there's, most innovation programs are about business as usual on one strain and new business models and new growth on the other. So I think the two can live together successfully. If you look at models like HSBC launching First Direct or Amazon, which was a bookseller, moving into Amazon Video, I don't think it's a zero-sum game.
Agreed. So if you take...
But I'm talking business model innovation specifically.
Yeah, so if I expand, I go away from my narrow mind thinking, and I think more around Google. So anyone who knows Google know at one point, maybe 3 years ago, they had, I think, 18, 19 apps. And they actually had to kill most of them and go down back to 4 and start. And a lot of apps got decoupled. So a lot of programs started separating. So Facebook separated Messenger away from the main app. And there was a rationale behind that. And I think one of the reasons why you see that happening is actually when you have a lot of ideas and you're trying to organize them in a very structured way, you come up against barriers. And I totally agree with you. For some businesses like HSBC, they need to do that. But in a pure innovation sense, where there is a opportunity that no one has found, and you create a system that allows you to find new ground, you can't put that into a business structure. It doesn't work, from my point of view. It will work for a little bit, and you might get some innovation, and I think that's where we end up with quite a lot of gimmicks, where you have the world's first this and the world's first that, but actually it's not grounded in any long-term program. So I do agree with you. I just think there's very different types of innovation. I'm trying to see when an innovation comes into a company, however they get it, do we believe that it could die a horrible death because of the processes that exist? And how do we get around that, which would be my next question later.
Again, rooting it in my own experience, having been... Are we allowed to talk about this here? Maybe a little bit. So BBH Labs, for instance, in a kind of purple period, it was an extraordinary door into the business to do different kinds of projects with different clients, just the kinds of things that BBH as a business just simply wouldn't have done. And it led to other things. It was so dependent on the cast of characters involved in that labs unit. It was as much personality driven as it was anything else, but also it was about the platform and how it spoke and how the things that we did played in the open and made people interested and thought, well, if I know it's in BBH, but if I go through BBH Labs, I'm going to get something different. And for a good while, that was true. And I think it's fair to say that anybody that observed, there was a period where when key people left, the characters changed, it became much more of a communication platform, brilliant nonetheless. And if you're following the kind of World Cup of advertising they're running at the moment, it's great fun. And they still do some great things. But as a kind of innovation hub of BBH, it's now more about innovative thinking rather than doing. And I think it was just not possible, I think, within the really strong muscle memory of BBH as a business. If you lose some of those personalities that give a different balance, it very easily kind of reverts to ways that it had previously. And I think it's certainly, again, characters change and businesses go through cycles. But certainly my own observation of being there, I really saw that firsthand.
Thanks, that's a good point, good point. And then the final one, which I think you started touching on already, is how should we encourage innovation across the board when we're selling it? So once we've got an idea and we've created it, it's a lab or it's a partnership or we've incubated or someone's found something out of the blue, how would you, in your world, how would you explain you should keep that going while still keeping the business flowing? Obviously without creating multiple streams, which always brings its own complications. Heather? So I thought I'd drop you in that one.
Sorry, so I was just thinking about the point you made about
You've been a politician right now. Go on.
Just thinking about the point you made about how, it reminded me of when I helped to build the original Wira program at Telefonica. And that's a big corporate wanting to get involved in startups. And the way that it was done was that, they set up Wira as part of a separate entity, but brought people from different departments within to the business. And so what we did is each startup had a mentor from different departments of the bigger business to help them understand that, so that they began to understand innovation at its core. They began to understand and see how it became practical for the job that they were doing. And they were then able to feed some of that information back up into the business. And so that's how it started to change. It's a bit like the Friday Club. I don't know if any of you know the Friday Club. So I'm involved in this group called the Friday Club. It's a non-profit events company that brings together technology startups with marketing people. And what it is, the way that it's set up is the startups will have a business communications problem. We'll fill the room with about 50 marketing mentors. And what we do is the startups will do a presentation. The mentors then get to sit around with the startups to really understand innovation at its core and understand how it's going to impact their jobs, how it's going to impact their relationship with their clients, how it's going to impact the way that they make money. Because ultimately, it's a commercial business. And then they are then armed with the information to be able to go back into their businesses and sell that up. I think I've been involved with that for 5 years, and I think that's one of the smartest ways that I've seen it done, because it means that people are getting hands-on experience of seeing how it can impact them, and then you are able to go and have those conversations.
Yeah, so I guess that point raised is what you mentioned earlier today, which is around how you explore and how you exploit. So there are many organizations out there who exploit. So exploiting is when you have a product or service and you continue to sell it while you see the industry around you change. Exploring is when you create something brand new and it never quite launches, it never quite finishes, because you want to make it perfect. And I guess what you've mentioned is finding the best of two worlds, basically. Finding people who are super experienced, who know how to exploit, and finding people who are really looking at things in a new way and exploring and merging the two together.
I think it's an education process of the startups that we work with at the Friday Club will probably never be able to pay for the type of marketing experience that they can get by coming along to the event. But it also means that the marketers get to see it, they get to understand the impacts, they get to think about different revenue models, because innovation can be about business models as well. And so they start to learn that, and then they're able to think, well, how can I connect this to my clients? How can I connect this to anybody else?
Hey, Rob? Rob lives in this world every day, by the way. That's why he's thinking really hard here.
Somewhere on the spectrum as well,
yeah.
So I just have to think carefully about what I'm going to say. I was reflecting on Tannoy Takeover. We can talk about that, can't we? I think it went into some awards and stuff. This was when Adam was still at BBH. Did it come out of labs? Was that a labs thing? Yeah. So this was a project we also worked on, which was called Tannoy Takeover, and it was a project for Tesco. And I think this was a great example of selling innovation. So obviously BBH had a big incumbent relationship with Tesco, doing all kinds of different work with them. And they came up with this idea, which was on Father's Day, wouldn't it be amazing if you could phone up a number and book a recording of a little message for your dad, so when you're walking around your chosen store with them on Father's Day, it comes out over the tannoy, which is such a simple idea, but the execution of that's actually incredibly complicated. You've got to be able to choose which store. These tannoy systems are not particularly sophisticated, as you can imagine. Most of them are just like a microphone in the office somewhere, and so there was a whole kind of, the idea starts really simple, but then actually executing that is really, really difficult, and it was incredible. They pulled it off. The brand equity they got from it was amazing, all the social media coverage, you can imagine, dads bursting into tears in the shops and all this stuff. And that's a memory that stays with those customers, I guess, forever. So I don't know, I was lost thinking about that as an example of innovation being sold, and did it die, and how did that affect the relationship, and ultimately, I'm sure that wasn't the most lucrative part of the Tesco relationship, right? But it was a piece that punctuated it really nicely, and a great example of innovation in practice. So.
Great. So a question. After that was done, did anyone ever actually look into how it was done? And did anyone ever try to evolve the thinking behind how it was done? It's a question.
I couldn't state for sure.
Okay.
All a little bit political. But I think it's safe to assume that, no, that wasn't the case. I think what is important, though, it wasn't sold as innovation. That was sold as a brilliantly simple idea that would evoke some human response that was born of the fact that people don't tell their dads enough that they give a damn about them. Actually, that innovation enabled it to be delivered. And I think in terms of the sell, that's really something I think that we're serious about. Sell the purpose, sell the transformation, sell the outcome, not the thing itself. I think that's the trick.
However, on the technology side, I'm going to switch to tech now. On the technology side, technology innovates by iteration. It's a fact. We don't create anything new. I know we try and say we do, and I know some things are pretty...
Shoulders of giants, of course.
Yeah. So if you got blockchain is a modified version of a SQL database, storage. Tablets have existed since the days of the Egyptians. They were called tablets. So we bang on a lot about new stuff, but actually in technology, the way you improve is you iterate. So for instance, taking the idea, in the background to innovate, you would create, store, share, push up that thinking you've mentioned, and it would get used again in a very different format. For me, that's an innovative way of working. What tends to happen is there's a small thing that happens, it makes some noise or it makes the press, and then it dies. So I could say that wasn't innovation. Maybe it was a brand new idea, but in the background, it wasn't innovation thinking. So I'm going to try. We got like a minute to go. I want to take some questions from the crowd. Robin, if you want to add,
I think it's the difference between focusing on technological innovation and other kinds. I guess my point to answer the question is I think you have to sell innovation in order for it to live. I don't think selling it kills it, because I think it's so nascent, it's so new often, it's so scary for most people. Any kind of change is scary. So I think, to answer the question, I think it's the opposite. I think you have to sell it. I think you have to nurture it. I'm taking the North American version of selling. It's not a dirty word. You have to protect it, or else it will die.
Interesting. So, if I know currencies like digital currencies take a lot of bad press. Would you say the creation of a Bitcoin or Ethereum was in order to sell it? And is it an innovative idea? Is it something that was created for the good of the people, for instance? So I think for businesses, having innovation allows them to unlock new markets, new potential. But I think innovation as a whole is a way of exploring natively. It's a way of exploring. And while exploring, you can open new business opportunities. If you take stories that we're all familiar with, Facebook, Airbnb, the innovations that they continue to create is to open new market avenues, but also to do good for society. So I guess, yes, we could go really wide and talk about that, but I'm trying to keep it narrow in terms of our business. And ultimately, if you innovate inside, you can create opportunities, but if you buy innovation, do you think, it's just a flat question, I know I'm dangling the carrot here, do you think there's an opportunity that going forward we will see newer models that will allow sustain innovation across businesses? I'm going to leave this one to Adam, and then we're going to take some questions.
Yes.
cheat. Anyone got any questions? Oh, great. Thanks, guys.
Hi, hello. Okay, so you've started very nicely.
Sorry, it might be easier if you have a specific question you want to direct to any one of us.
No,
you
no,
call
it's just
us out.
like anyone can just jump in. So it's very nice that you started off by saying what is innovation. And unfortunately these days, a lot of people are abusing this term and it's quite elusive. Innovation by essence, I'm sure it's more of a problem-solving discipline, whether I'm trying to help you not lose your keys or trying to provide clean water to people somewhere in a third world country. How do you deal with the fact that many campaigns or guerrilla marketing nowadays are being coined under the term of innovation, such as the Tesco Father's Day campaign, versus more problem-solving triggered practices, which is true innovation within a company?
So I agree with you. I think this is why the panel is so split. So we've got technologists, we've got people, organizations, futurists, people who talk to clients, you know. So I agree with you. I think what we have to think about when we think about innovation, it can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So I have to wear two hats every day. I wear a CEO hat and I can wear a tech hat. And from an organization point of view, definitely innovation is people, it's structure, it's about making money, selling your product. But as a pure technologist, it also is about how you make things. It's about how you make things better. It's about how you find ways of working. It's about how you push things to the market quickly and how you make things very rapidly. So a good example is a lot of people talk about MVPs. I hate MVPs. I hate hearing that word. There's a couple of guys who are now doing SLC, which is simple, lovable, and complete. And it's basically, if you want a car, you start with a scooter, you go to a bicycle, you go to a moped, and then you go to a car. That makes more sense, as opposed to you get a car with no wheels, no window, no steering wheel. And I think these are the things you see in the way we work with brands. So I do agree with you that the guerrilla marketing might seem on the outside is not an innovation stuff, but I guarantee you the person who was in that lab or the person who was not in the company has innovated in the background, and that's why you hear it.
And things start narrow, then go broad, and that, I don't know, the best example of this is probably DeepMind, right? So DeepMind, who got acquired by Google, so now it's Google DeepMind, came out of Oxford and Cambridge, and these were the guys that solved the game of Go, if you haven't bumped into it. It's a fantastic documentary called AlphaGo on Netflix, which if you haven't watched is well worth an hour of your time, genuinely fascinating and quite moving story. And they set about, their two-point business plan was solve intelligence, and then having solved intelligence, use that to solve everything else, right? And that was quite a difficult, where do you start? So they started by really, really narrow with the innovation question of, can we create an artificial intelligence system that can beat the best human in the world at this very complex game, but a game with set rules and set boundaries, right? Having done that, they're now able to take the innovation that they've built and broaden it, and now they're applying it to things like radiography, right? And using the same techniques that they built for this narrow use case to go and, you know, be far more efficient at detecting tumors in X-rays and all this sort of stuff. So I think innovation has to start narrow, and actually those puff piece, you know, guerrilla marketing ideas might seem really like, all right, whatever, but they can turn into quite meaningful change. And sometimes it's not even the person that did it. Like maybe the Tannoy Takeover team won't change the world, but maybe someone will see that and go, huh, okay, so we could like do transcoded voice over a phone call, which we could then play in a different location, or maybe in a refugee context, that's really powerful or something, right? So I think it's, and this is the shoulders of giants thing. So don't be too cynical about those things would be how I would answer the question. I think it's an important part of the whole process. So.
And I think that that's how it becomes sustainable as well. You know, because you take the idea and it goes through an iterative process. So it started off with Go, and then somebody else will build upon that, and that's how I think that we can get to those places. I agree with you that, you know, innovation is about problem solving first, but that's coming from my background and my experiences. To me, it is problem solving first, and being with my tech futurist hat on, we can then use technology as a means to do that. And it's almost for me, it's almost the definition of emerging tech. Old ideas, old problems, plus new tech that's come of age, bring those together, and that's how we solve it. And for me, that's the future of innovation.
Hello. This is less a question and more just wanted to bounce something off the panel that we've just implemented at our agency. We're a B2B creative agency, so B2B marketing on paper is the less innovative, sexy end of the market. Whereas, we're the first agency to bring out our own labs arm, and we're trying to push the boundaries a bit. But we still found that it's hard to sell in those really interesting problem-solving type ideas of clients. So there's an idea that's come out of the agency, and we're just PRing it next week, exclusive, which is the Earnest 10%. The agency is called Earnest. And what we're saying to our clients, because we've kind of seen this work on a couple of occasions, is we know how hard it is for you internally. We work with a lot of blue chips. It's really hard to sell in something new to the business and to get extra budget for doing that. So with the Earnest 10%, we're suggesting that we just take 10% of the core, say, campaign budget, and you put it into something new, something different your competitors have never tried before, you've never tried before, your competitors have never seen, etc. And we're just trying to kind of reframe that to make it easier for our clients to try new things. And I just wondered what the panel thought about that, because obviously it's the opposite of what you said there. We are selling innovations and we're putting it as a line item on a standard budget. So any thoughts? And honestly, I've got broad shoulders, thick skin and all that, so be brutal.
Sorry, don't hang too hard on the line. It's just to grab the attention. I do agree with you. So I in my past, I've started a company where we deliberately set the company up to go after, I don't want to call the other agencies names, but agencies who we believed were just saying innovation for the sake of it. However, talking to clients, we found very different types of clients. So a company that is founded, like Ella's Kitchen, for instance, they're an innovative company. That's who they are. They've gone against the market. They don't have the budgets of the big boys. They think very clever, very fast. They iterate, they test. And if an idea doesn't work, they don't cry over it. They move on. Go into a bank where it's got stakeholders and you've got social groups and committee boards. You can't fail fast. It's quite difficult. You've got to go through a process where you have to get the organization itself to understand what innovation is and how it works, that potentially they could get nothing out of it. So one of the things that's very hard to tell a client is you're going to spend X amount of money and I don't know what I'm doing. And I don't know if you're going to get something out of it exactly as you need. Because when we walk into any brief, there's KPIs at the bottom of it straight away. And you're like, well, you're not going to innovate if you've got KPIs down there. Because ultimately, if you want pure, clean thinking in terms of execution, it's quite difficult. If it's an organization change, like we're discussing with people, then you can apply that kind of thinking. So it all depends on what client you're working with. I find that companies that are either going through that repurpose model, which is basically someone's come in and disrupted the entire world, they tend to listen. The ones that are still making the dough, are still cashing in, it's much harder to convince them because actually you've got to work a lot harder. Sometimes you have to do stuff for free. You have to build it for yourself to show them that they can be disrupted, and then they buy into the idea. So it all depends on which client. You can see Robin looking at me. Go on.
Well, what we do at AAR is help agencies sell in things to clients. So 2 pieces of advice. Client benefit, not agency feature. So why do I care? What's in it for me? I mean, and secondly, trying to sell anything new into clients is really hard. In our experience, you have to slow it down dramatically because whilst you know what you mean by innovation, they might not even know what you mean. So I think it's slowing it down, de-risking it, and explaining your methodology of how you're going to get them there. So it's very much about the benefit to them, because you've kind of come along, bouncy-tailed puppy, going, "We're going to do some innovation for you. This is fantastic. We're really, really excited." And they're like, ooh, they're more like cats. They're like, "Wait a minute. Sounds a bit risky. Not quite sure. 10%? How am I going to sell that into my boss?" It's a very human thing. So it's more about selling in new things and slowing it down and talking about the methodology of how you're going to get them there, what the deliverables are going to be. Is it going to make them famous? Is it going to make them more money? Is it going to get them their next promotion? Those kinds of very human aspects.
It just reminds me of one of my favorite quotes. We're storytellers, right? So the purpose of a storyteller is not to tell you what to think, but to give you things to think upon. If you can get them to ask themselves more questions, rather than you going in, we've got the answers for everything, get them to ask questions. They'll come back to you because they'll want more information. You've made them curious.
And we're story makers as well.
So, yeah, story makers, story doers.
Anybody else?
Any more questions? We've got 4 minutes left. No?
I would like to ask a question
Go on,
about how can you create a culture of an innovation within inside of an agency? How can you create a culture of innovation inside of the agency? So how do you actually have a company that can be innovative?
Ah, right. Okay, so it's very simple from my point of view. It's all around how you give authority, transparency, and autonomy. So in there, for instance, the first thing I implemented was a 70-20-10 rule. I did want to go for the 80-20. For those who don't know, it's 70% of everything we work on is for clients. It's paid, pays our bills. 20% are for ideas that you can create on your own as long as they benefit the company in some way. It can be financial or PR. And 10% you can do whatever you want. So it took a while. It took about a year for the team to even get their head around it. Because basically at the end of every month, I was like, there's $2,000. It can come from any department. I don't care what it is. You can spend it. It can be technology. It can be new ways of working. It can be going on a training course. And all I kept getting was, but that's not innovation. Innovation is VR. And innovation is, no. So that's one way of doing it. So if you have anyone in your organization or you have the power, that's a really good way of starting a new thinking, creating a pocket of people, like you mentioned.
So is that across everybody within the organization? Every single person?
Everybody.
Receptionist to ECD?
Everybody. And one of the models we have at DARE when we engage with clients is something we call the experience definition vision session. It's where you basically ask the CEO to come into a meeting and you ask the last hired person to come into the meeting. So we've had meetings where you have the CEO and a guy or girl who's been there for 2 days, and you map out the entire company, and the CEO's like, it's all great, I make this much money, and my shareholders are happy. And then you ask the person at the bottom, they go, I got no training, I don't know how the tech work, people ring me and shout at me every day, I was told that this, and that's a way you can create innovation straight away, because you can say, you know what, technology can enable that person not to be stressed. Organization change and how you look down at the company can improve the way you treat your staff. So innovation is a very wide thing. And I think there are little bits of it. And when it works perfectly is when you get a brand like an Airbnb that was technology founded in innovation, but they know not to exploit it too much. So they've spent a lot of time exploring new avenues. They're doing buildings, they're looking at society, gig economy, Amazon's another one. So I think a lot of brands are out there, we've mentioned a few today, who are doing that. For agencies, we have to catch up. I think actually clients are in front of the agencies internally.
The only thing I'd add to that, really it's about culture, is about the repetition of established behavior consistently over time. So again, having a kind of furious spike of this kind of activity isn't enough. It has to be sustained, it has to be repeated, and the message has to be consistent.
Any other questions? No? Thank you for having us. I hope we've given you some insights and some knowledge.
Thanks a lot.
And
Thank you.
Thanks all. Thank you.
I just want to give Robin the chance to show her book. I think you should take 30 seconds to show your book.
We've published a report which is free to download if anyone's interested, called Navigating the Corporate Innovation Partner Landscape. So it's trying to help clients and agencies understand the spread of people who can help you with innovation these days. So it's on the AAR website. If anyone, I will give one to the first lady who asked a question because you were very brave. But you can download it on the website at aar.co.uk. So if anyone's interested, it's a good little read.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you.